Hello, future Saints. My name is Andrew Weller. I'm the Dean of Enrollment and Strategic Marketing here at St. Stephen's and St. Agnes School. We're so excited to have you here for this evening's webinar on financial assistance. With me is Jill Iverson, who's the Director of Financial Assistance. She's going to be working in the background, managing the webinar and managing our Q&A process. So we're going to be talking to you, frankly, for about 20 minutes or so. And then we'll go from there into Q&A for as long as we can handle that. So you can see here the agenda of what we're going to be covering. We're going to talk about some terms that are really important. We want to make sure that we're all on the same page when it comes to these terms. A bit about our philosophy and how we approach financial assistance here at St. Stephen's and St. Agnes. And then we will walk you through the steps for applying for financial assistance. And then, as I said, we will end up with Q&A at the end of that. Let me take a moment to just talk about the Q&A. There's some important things for you to know. So in the Q&A box, you can put anything you want and nobody else will see it. So that will just be for Jill Iverson and I to see. Unless it's a general question that she thinks would be helpful to everyone, then she'll post the answer so everybody can see it. But you can send in your question knowing that only she and I will see it. But if you're going to do that, you need to do two things, because what we will do is we will follow up with you tomorrow and Friday based on whatever you put into the Q&A box for us to take a look at. The first thing you need to do is you need to make sure that you have named yourself here on Zoom something that we will recognize. At this point, 18 months into COVID, I think we all know how to change our name there in the bottom of the Zoom. So it's important that you put a name that we can actually match up to our files so that we can be able to reach out to you. And the second thing that's really important for us to be able to follow up with you on financial assistance is to make sure that you've actually gone into the Saints website, SSSAS.org. You've gone into our website and you have registered with us in admission. You've clicked into the form that says, I'd like more information, and you have provided us your details so that we can be in touch with you. That is different than signing up for this evening's webinar. So if you signed up for this evening's webinar, you went through a Zoom sign-up process and were able to join us here this evening for that. That's different than signing up for information from the school. So it's important that you actually go over to the website if you haven't already signed up asking to get information from the school. And then what Jill and I will do tomorrow is we will match the name in the Q&A from this evening to what's in our database, and then we'll be able to email you or call you accordingly. So you kind of need to be in two places. And then just a final note as it has to do with signing up for information from us. Here in Washington, D.C., many of us, not many of us, many of you, work in secure environments and government environments, and those emails are not friendly to schools. We have found over the years, particularly with increased tightening of security around certain email addresses and spam filters, that things don't get through. So when signing up to receive information from us and for us to be able to reach out to you, highly encourage you to use a personal email address and not a work one where things might get caught up or never even get to you for you to see them. And if you were with me at my webinar back on August 25th, if you were, welcome back, glad to have you back again. Mentioned then, and I'll mention again, a really great idea that a lot of families do is actually create an email address just to get you through this admission process and share that with all the schools you're looking at. And then you'll have all the information you need from all the schools about admissions, about events, about financial assistance, etc., all in one email location. So again, if you're going to put something in the Q&A for us, make sure we can identify who you are if you want us to follow up with you, and then make sure you're also in our system at school here so that we have your contact information. Otherwise, at the end of the evening, we'll be doing questions and answers that are more broadly appropriate to everyone who's on the webinar around policies or procedures or steps you have to go through. But if you have a personal Q&A that you want us to be able to address, then put that in there and we will follow up with you tomorrow or Friday, as I said. So there's probably the two most important things are going to be at the top of the webinar. Not that I want you to drop off after the first 5 minutes, but if you hear nothing else from me, I want you to hear these first two things. And the first one has to do with terminology. It's really important that we're all on the same page when we're having our conversations. And that is the difference between financial assistance and scholarship. And many people use those terms interchangeably, and they are not the same thing. So I want to make sure that we are clear what we're talking about, what is what, and then how does that apply to St. Stephen's and St. Agnes? So this little graphic hopefully could be a little helpful to you. So financial assistance is about what you can afford. That's a financial conversation and a financial partnership we're going to have with you. And you're going to fill out some paperwork, and an outside organization is going to analyze that for us, and it's going to help us understand what they think you can afford to pay in tuition for your child. Scholarship is not about a financial conversation. Scholarship is money that schools spend to recruit students that they want to have at their school. That might be a scholarship for amazing piano players, as we were listening to before we started the webinar. It might be a scholarship for athletes. It might be a scholarship for student leaders or incredibly bright and talented students. Scholarship is about providing money for what your child can do for the school, what your child brings to the school. Financial assistance is about providing money so that your child can come to the school when they might not be able to do otherwise. So here in the Washington, D.C. area, one of the reasons this gets complicated is that some schools offer scholarship, some schools offer financial assistance, and there's a few that actually offer both. At the independent day schools, so that would be St. Stephen's and St. Agnes. Other schools, it would be Potomac, Georgetown Day, Sidwell, St. Albans. Those independent day schools here in the DC area, we all offer financial assistance. We do not offer scholarship. So for the rest of the evening, everything I'm telling you is all about financial assistance. So that's the one of the two big takeaways I want you to take from this evening is just knowing the difference and knowing which schools offer what. And for us here, it's financial assistance. The other big takeaway is I want you to know and to hear from me, we want to partner with you. We want to go down this path with you. Our financial assistance is to support families who would like to have their child with us who couldn't otherwise afford it. And we honor and understand that that's sometimes a challenging conversation. It's a confidential conversation. We know here in independent schools and day schools, we ask three things of you, and they are sometimes the three most precious things of you. They are your child. We ask you to trust us with your child. They are your finances. We ask you to partner with us and invest in your child's education, and we ask you for your time. And so we want to be in this relationship with you, whether it's for the next 12 years, if you have a young future saint, or maybe it's just for the next 4 years. You have a saint who's only going to come to us for the high school years. But we want to be in that conversation with you, and we want to work with you. We have funds available for families who qualify for it and who complete the process on time. So we'll talk a little bit later, but there's an admissions process and there's a financial assistance process. It's two different processes. But for those families who complete both of them kind of in our first round in the admission cycle, we have financial assistance to help those families. We have about $6.3 million in financial assistance to help families. Much of it is funded very generously by our alumni, by past parents whose children who went through here. And they are all donating that money because they want to be helpful to future Saints families to be able to come here who they otherwise couldn't afford to come here. So those are the two big things here at the top of the webinar. The terminology, that's really important, but can also be equally confusing at times. And also just wanting you to know that we want to engage in this relationship with you. And it's a judgment-free zone. It is your child and your money and you can, and your time, and you can do what you want with all three of those. We're not here to pass judgment in any of that, but we're here to work with you. So we look forward to doing that and inviting you into this conversation and this relationship with us now and for the coming years. So let's talk about some of the assumptions around financial assistance that we are making. And I'm going to bring those forward to you here for a second so that you can see those. The first is that we expect that paying tuition is a priority for your family. If you're choosing an independent school education where tuition is charged, we assume that you are planning for that. It is a priority for your family, and that you see your family as the primary source of paying tuition. Financial assistance comes in much later to fill the gap, but the assumption is paying tuition is your priority. We expect all parents involved in the life of the student to be part of sharing the cost of tuition. Schools are not bound by divorce decrees or court agreements or anything like that about who is and isn't going to pay for education. Anyone who's going to be involved in St. Stephen's, St. Agnes as a parent is expected to be part of this process. So Who might those people be? Those are people who expect to have their name and phone number listed in case of an emergency. Those are people who want to come in for teacher-parent conferences. Those are parents who expect to receive the report card when it comes out. Those are people who put their child down as a dependent on their taxes. So any of those roles that parents have, they're engaged with the school and engaged in their child's life, and they're also engaged in this process and this conversation we're going through. We're also assuming that all parents are working. Again, if you're choosing an independent school education and paying tuition, we expect that parents are working to be able to make that investment and to partner with us. Exceptions to that would be if you have someone under the age of 5 in your home, and we understand that parents need to stay home. Or if you have a full-time permanent elder relative who's living with you in the home and you need to be providing care and support to that elder relative. Otherwise, we expect that parents are going to be working. Again, as I said before, no judgment, your choices. However, if both parents aren't working, the formula will assume an income that doesn't exist. So the formula will say, if this second parent was working, this is how much more money they'd be able to contribute to tuition, and they will put that into the formula. Again, it's up to you. Funding is also regardless of other factors, and that's a lot of the difference we just talked about a moment ago between scholarship and financial assistance. Our financial assistance is not given out because your child is brilliant and wonderful, and I'm sure they are. It is not given out because you are the best homeroom parent in the world and volunteer all your time at the school. It is not granted because students have a certain GPA while they're with us. All of our funding and all of our grants are need-based. Again, as I said, these are all financial conversations. And then the last assumption is that all institutions are participating. So sometimes what we hear every once in a while is a family says to us, we have an older child who's applying to college and we think they'll have a better chance of getting in if we don't apply for financial assistance. So we're going to put all our cash towards college. And so we need St. Stephen's and St. Agnes to step up and help us with our second child. That is not the case. We will help you with the second child, but we also expect that you will apply for financial assistance from the college or maybe from another school that another child goes to. We're not providing financial assistance so that other institutions don't have to provide financial assistance. And you'll see in a couple minutes how having multiple kids kind of fits into this, but we expect that you're going to be applying to multiple institutions, then you'll be applying multiple financial assistance. All right, so what are the primary factors? This is probably the big question, right? This is what everybody wants to know. The biggest primary factor is a family's income, their assets, their benefits. Maybe you receive a housing benefit, maybe you receive veterans benefits or Social Security benefits. Assets, retirement accounts, savings accounts, 529 accounts, and parents' income. That's the big piece there. A family's reasonable liabilities and expenses. As I said at the beginning, this is your money and you can do what you want with it. But if a family of 4 chooses to live in an 8-bedroom house with a swimming pool out back, we're not going to be supporting that lifestyle choice through the financial assistance program. The formula and the program are set up to account for life here in the DC area. So the housing allowance is one of the largest in the United States. The cost of living allowance is quite large. So we're factoring these things in. We know what it takes to raise a family in the Washington, DC area and the cost of housing here. We actually also, because we're an Episcopal school, we factor in an allowance for charitable giving. As an Episcopal school, we want to encourage and support families who want to be philanthropic, particularly if they're trying to raise their children to be philanthropic. Not all schools allow for a charitable allowance, but we do because it's part of our values as an Episcopal school. Again, those are all things that are reasonable liabilities and expenses. Lifestyle choices you make are entirely yours to make, but they may not be funded through our financial assistance program. The age of parents is really important. The formula has a bit of a sliding scale, and it's calculating how many years you have left to work. And why that's important, because it's how many years do you have left to save for retirement. So parents who are on the older end of that formula or the older end of that sliding scale, they may qualify for more financial assistance because the formula is saying they really need to save for retirement because they don't have a lot of years left to save for retirement. Families who are young and just starting out, it's not going to allow as much retirement. There's absolutely a retirement qualification in there. We want everyone to be saving for retirement, but if you're trying to aggressively save for retirement, again, that's a family choice you're making with your money, and that's absolutely fine, but it's not something that the financial assistance program is going to support. And as I mentioned a minute ago, number of children tuition charging schools. This is a really big factor. So what the outside organization that all the schools use, what it does, it's going to come up with the numbers, your estimated family contribution. This is what they believe you can pay towards tuition. If you have one child and one tuition to pay, and they are coming to St. Stephen's or St. Agnes, or anyone else for that fact, the formula will say, we get all that money. They can afford X, and all of X can go to the one child. If you have two children with us, or two children, one's in college and one's with us, it's going to take that amount of money that it says that you can afford, and then it's going to proportionally divide it up between the number of children. So why is this important? And you'll see this again in another slide in a minute. For some of our families, they don't qualify for financial assistance with their first child. So if you have a child coming into kindergarten, which is at the low end of our tuition range, you may not qualify for financial assistance. And then families get anxious and they think, I'm not going to send my first child if I can't send my second child. And sometimes that second child doesn't even exist yet. They're just planning on having a second child. That's kind of in their long-term plans. But you might qualify if you have the second child with us eventually. So that's a conversation we can have. So if you're applying for financial assistance and you don't get it, and you want to understand what might it look like if you had two children here, we'll be happy to walk you through that and help you understand what financial assistance might be available if there's a second child that comes to us. So if you're a young family starting out with young children, we will work with you as your family grows over the years. Again, this number of tuitions that you're paying, that's a really huge factor in your financial assistance grant. And then lastly, and probably obviously, is the cost of tuition. So as I said, they will come up with this number, right? So here's your number that they say that you can afford, and then here's our tuition. And here's the financial assistance part, right? We are going to work really hard to close that gap. And as I said at the top of the webinar, for families who complete their admission process and their financial assistance process in the first round, in the primary admission season, which we're in right now, we have plenty of funds to be able to support those families based on their calculated need. Now, of course, sometimes your calculated need and what you feel your calculated need is might be different. And so we need to partner with you and have conversations and understand why you feel differently than the analysis feels that you can afford. And sometimes there's just information we don't know. And sometimes it is honestly as simple as a comma went where a period should go, or in entering something, an extra zero got thrown on the end. So if what you're told is what your family should be able to afford tuition seems unreasonable to you, we want to have that conversation with you. But that gap between cost of tuition and what you can afford to pay is obviously a big factor in what your financial assistance is going to be. All right, so some big questions that we get every year. I'm going to try and jump ahead of these, and maybe you've put them in the Q&A already, so you're going to get your answer now. Can you appeal your financial assistance grant? The short answer is no. The longer answer is yes, if there's something we didn't know. Because we're doing this off the analysis, and because this is not about how wonderful your child is or what their GPA is or what an incredible volunteer you might be as a parent at the school, because this is a financial analysis and a financial decision and partnership and commitment from the school to your family, if there's nothing different, if there isn't anything we didn't know when we made the initial grant, then there's no appealing the grant. If all you're coming back is saying, we wish it to be larger, but there's no additional information, then there's no point in appealing the grant because it's not going to change. But if there's something that we need to know, or maybe something changed between the time in which you applied and the decision came out, right? Maybe something happened in your world, then let's have that conversation and let's see how we can kind of fudge the numbers and look at the formula and see how we can support you. Do I apply again? Yes, you will apply annually, and you do the same thing when you apply for financial assistance at colleges too. You apply every single year, and I'll go into that a little bit more in another slide. I applied and I didn't qualify. Can I apply again in the future? Absolutely. And as I said just a minute ago, in many cases, those families, the configuration of that family is a family that has a young child joining us in kindergarten or one of our earlier grades and they don't qualify. But when the second child comes along to kindergarten and the older one's now in third or fourth grade, you might qualify. So just because you didn't qualify in 1 year doesn't mean that you won't qualify in the future, particularly if any of those big factors we just looked on the last slide change, then you might absolutely qualify, and we'd love to have that conversation with you. If you enroll next year, I did not apply. I have enrolled without any financial assistance. Can I then apply the year after that? You cannot. You need to wait 2 years to apply for financial assistance if you enrolled not having applied for financial assistance in the first place. And then will my grant change? Yes, it will change over time. And I'll show you a slide in another minute or two where you'll see your grant kind of changes proportionally to the change in tuition, assuming that things in your financial profile stay consistent. And for some people they do. For some government employees, their income, we can see it, it stays pretty steady and kind of moves in time on a pretty predictable pattern. And then there are parents such as realtors who don't, right? You have good years and you have bad years, and your income goes up and your income goes down. And so we'll work with that. So will your grant change? Yes, it will change over time. So what's going to happen in subsequent years? Talking about will your grant change? The first thing we want you to know is once you are enrolled, once you are a Saints family and you are receiving financial assistance from us, you are now our priority. Our current families who are with us this school year here in 21-22, they've already gone through the financial assistance process for next year. We've already squared them away and made decisions and set money aside for them. And then the money that we now have left is the money that we're now going to work with all of you coming through the admission process. So it's important to us that you have complete confidence in us and in our partnership going forward. If you're coming in for 4 years or 12 years and you're coming in through the financial assistance program, we want you to feel comfortable that we're going to be with you lockstep all along the way until the time in which your son graduates and heads off to college. So you will be our priority once you're in with us. As I said, you'll go through this annual application process because things change, right? The realtor example is a good one. Hey, maybe you win the lottery. Or maybe something great doesn't happen. Maybe an elder relative has to move in with you. And so a parent has to stop working and there's less income and there's more expenses. And so that's why you go through that every year so that we can work with you. As you see here, it changes as you change. You add tuitions, we're there for you. Change your careers if reasonable, we want to support that. But as I said earlier on, we expect that if you are choosing an independent school where you need to pay tuition, that is part of your financial planning. So while your child's enrolled in a tuition charging school and enrolled in college, that would not be the time to give up your $200,000 job and decide that you want to start a business growing organic kale in your backyard. We're not suddenly going to come in and support your kale business with financial assistance. So we expect as you're making long-term financial plans and long-term career plans that you're thinking about your obligation to your child to have them here at St. Stephen's and Agnes and the tuition payments that go with that. And then lastly, our goal is no surprises. So as I said at the top of the slide, we want you to be confident in your partnership and we want you to be confident that you can count on us to continue to work with you year after year. We don't want there to be any surprises. If there are surprises, we're going to call you long before there's any time that you need to worry. If something comes through and seems completely different than it did in the past, or seems wacky, or is completely out of line with your expectations, we're not just going to surprise you with a grant and send that out to you. We're going to call you. And again, we want to make sure there's not a typo, there's not some missing information, there's not something you don't understand. But our goal is that you can come into this in year one with confidence that no matter how many years you're with us, we're going to work with you through that. We know that this is important to families, and it's important. They want to have their children here, but they also want to be financially responsible to their family, and they want to be able to be making long-term financial plans. We in no way want families to be in distress. We want to work with you at the level that makes sense for you and at the level of financial assistance for which you qualify based on all the paperwork you put in. I was talking to a parent a couple weeks ago who wanted to talk to me about financial assistance, and she was a little sheepish about it, and we were kind of in a corner talking, and she shared with me, she said, we only pay $10,000 for our child goes to school now, and we'd really love to have our daughter be with you next year, but all we can really afford and all we've been paying is $10,000. And I know that doesn't seem like a lot of money to you. And what I said to her was, what it seems to me is it's a lot of money to you. And that's what matters. So if a family can pay all the tuition, great. If a family can only pay $10,000 and that's their level of being able to commit tuition and their level of partnering and their level of investing in their child's education, then that's what financial assistance is for. That's exactly who it's for. So as I said on the very beginning, right, the number 2 thing I want you to know is that our approach to this is that we want to make a saints education affordable for families who might otherwise not find it affordable. So we're going to go down these subsequent years with you in partnership in these conversations, and we look forward to it. We value and we're honored by the honesty and the conversations that we have to have around these topics with families. So subsequent years, this is what I was just saying a minute ago. I was going to show you the chart. So you can see along the bottom, that's kind of the growth of tuition over a 12-year period. So let's say you enroll and you're in our youngest saints with kindergarten, you're going to stay all the way through high school for 12 years. So that red line is showing you the tuition increase over the years. And you'll see there's like 2 little bumps. I don't know if you can see this. I'm going to pull it forward for you. So there's that little bump at 6th grade along the red line, and that's when you're coming into middle school because there's a tuition jump between lower and middle school. And then you'll see on the red line, there's a bit of a bump there at 9th grade as well, because there's a tuition jump when you go between middle and upper school. The top line is your net tuition. So what are you paying? And you can see it's pretty proportional to the increase in tuition. So as tuition kind of goes up at that certain angle, the cost at which you'll be paying goes up at that certain angle. And you can also see those same 2 bumps on the green line. At 6th grade, there's a little bit of a bump because you move to middle school. And then again, 9th grade, there's a little bit of bump because you move to upper school. But the green line represents the average financial assistance grant that families receive at St. Stephen and St. Agnes. So you can see over time, that grant will move proportionately with the increases in tuition. Now, once you figured out what you have to pay, whatever that number is, right, there's that gap. So there's the cost of tuition, financial assistance, and then this is what you have to pay. So let's take that family I was talking to a couple of weeks ago that can pay $10,000, which is great. Their perspective was they can only pay $10,000. Our perspective is great, you can pay $10,000, and that's what's comfortable for your family, and that's the commitment you're willing to make. So once you know what it is that you're going to have to pay, then we do offer payment plans. So you can see here anywhere 2 months, 4 months, 10 months, 12 months. The payment plans have no fees. The payment plans have no interest. So if you choose 2 months versus 12 months, you'll end up paying the exact same amount of money. So please take advantage of the payment plans if that makes life easier for you and helps you plan your finances better, right? It's kind of almost like a car payment or mortgage payment, right? You do that 12-month plan, it just becomes part of your pattern and part of your planning. We know that for some of our families, the cost that they're going to have to pay in tuition, whether it's the full tuition or whether it's their $10,000 or whatever portion of their tuition it is, that number isn't so daunting. It's that number all at once. Do I have to come up with $10,000 at once? Do I have to come up with $25,000 all at once? And no. So you can see here and look at the payment plans. And when you enroll your child with us and then become a saint, you'll have the option to pick which payment plan makes the most sense for your family. So last but not least, what's this application process look like? So as I said earlier, we have plenty of funds available for families that go through our standard admission process and timeline. And that means right now you are working on your application for admission. If you haven't started one and financial assistance is going to be a factor in your final decision, and it's going to be important to your family to be afford to have your child become a saint, then you need to be working on your admission application right now and completing all the steps. And if you haven't done that, you go right back to our website, SSSAS.org, and go to apply, and you'll create a username and a password, because none of us have enough usernames or passwords in our life, but this is an important one. And then it will walk you through all the materials that you need. It'll walk you through all the stuff for applying for admission from once you get into your account, once you create that login. You can sign up for tours and interviews and all sorts of upcoming events. So if you haven't begun your admission application, strongly encourage you to get rolling on your admission application so that you're at the front of the line. On December 1st, well, let me go back. When you file an application for admission, there's going to be a box towards the end that you check, and it asks if you're interested in financial assistance. If you check that box on December 1st, we will send you an email with all the important information you need about financial assistance and the link to take you over to the outside company that does the analysis so that you can begin the financial assistance application process. If you apply after December 1st, or maybe you're looking at this webinar, sometime this winter, you're looking at the recording online, and it's past December 1st, then we will send that email out once every 7 days. So if your application comes in after December 1st, you check the box that says you're interested in financial assistance, and then we, within 7 days, will send you all the information you need. The application deadline to complete the actual application itself and to do all the data entry is on February 1st. And then the deadline for uploading all your documents into the financial assistance system is February 15th. So at a minimum, you will need to upload your 1040 and you will need to upload a pay stub or pay stubs for parents. As you work your way through the financial assistance application, kind of section by section, it may ping you and tell you additional things that it needs based on the answers that you give it. So you're going to want to kind of keep track of the documentation that it's going to be looking for so that you can upload that and do all that by February 15th. And again, I can't reiterate it enough. If you can get your application for admission done on time, you can get your application for financial assistance done on time, and we can agree as to what your reasonable family contribution should be, we should be able to close that gap for you for families in first rounds. Families that come later in the process, that's when we're running a little short on money. It can be a little more difficult. But if you're sitting on this webinar in early November, then I know you're on the ball and you're already thinking about all this. And so all of you on here should be just fine. March 4th is the first Friday in March, and that in the Washington, D.C. area is when we will release all our decisions. So you will find out on March 4th whether or not we are inviting your child to join St. Stephen's St. Agnes and inviting your family to join us at St. Stephen's St. Agnes, because we certainly believe that this is a school for a family, for siblings and for parents, not just for the child. And when you get that offer of admission, you will also right then and there get your financial assistance offer. So you can look at that and be like, okay, we got in, what's it going to cost us? And you'll get it all there at once. So we don't want you to have to wait. We don't want you to get excited about getting in and then be anxious waiting to find out what is it going to cost. So you will get all that information on March 4th. And again, if there's something that seems incredibly off to us, that feels like we're not on the same page, we're not even reading the same book, we'll be in touch with you before March 4th. Again, we don't want any surprises. So we'll reach out to you if we have any concerns that we want to be able to review with you about your financial assistance application. Otherwise, you'll get all that information on March 4th. It's such an exciting day for families. But honestly, over here at St. Stephen's St. Agnes, it's our favorite day of the year in the admission office to be able to send out all that good news and to then wait to hear from people and get their excited emails and texts and calls and everything else. So we love March 4th, and we look forward to being in touch with you on that day and you being in touch with us. So we're going to move to Q&A, and I'm going to put this slide up for a minute while I just remind you about kind of what you want to do for Q&A. And apologies for people who are right here at 8 o'clock. We appreciate you, but I'm going to say this one more time for people who showed up a little late. So you can put anything you want in the Q&A, and nobody on the webinar is going to be able to see it unless it's a general question that we answer. If we answer it because we think it's applicable for everybody, then you'll be able to see it. Otherwise, just Jill Iverson, who's the Director of Financial Assistance and who's running this whole webinar, she and I will be the only ones who can see your question. We will get back to you in the next 2 days, either tomorrow afternoon at some point or Friday, to answer your questions or to be helpful in any way we can. But for us to be able to do that, we need to do 2 things, please. On your Zoom, you have a screen name. I imagine after 18 months of Zooming, we all know about the screen name and we know how to change it. You need to make sure that your screen name is something that we'll understand, that we can identify and be like, oh, this is the Smith family. Because when you send in the question, it's going to say it's coming from your screen name. So make sure your screen name is not your phone number or a nickname or just your initials or something like that. Make sure your screen name is something that we can figure out. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take your screen name and your question and we're going to link it to our database system to figure out, okay, now that we know who this is, we have an answer to the question, what is their phone number and email? So we're going to go into our database and find your phone number and email. So it's going to be really important that you have registered with us through our website to get more information. Now, you registered to come to this Zoom. If you're here tonight, you registered through Zoom to join us for this webinar. But you also need to go to the website, SSSAS.org, and register to receive more information so that we have your information and then we know how to get in touch with you. So I've had that long enough for you to grab the emails if you want them. And Jill, what's going on? What kind of questions do we have from these guys tonight?
Well, we have a few questions so far. A couple of them have asked if you could clarify what you mean by first round.
So in Washington, D.C., all the independent day schools work on kind of 2 rounds. So for the first round, those admission applications, Jill, correct me if I'm wrong, it's around January 15th. I don't know what day of the week that is this year. Is it still January 15th?
It is.
Okay, so your application for admission is due and needs to be completed by January 15th. And then, as I said earlier, a couple slides up, your application for financial assistance is due February 1st. That will put you in our first round. If you complete both of those processes by those 2 deadlines, you will be in our first round. And then come March 4th, you will find out the results of both of those applications that you've submitted. Anyone who applies after January 15th or completes the process late, doesn't get all their boxes checked and all their paperwork in, you automatically go in the second round and you actually won't hear from us until April. So we'll finalize our first round in March, and then quite honestly, we go on spring break and then we come back in April and all the area schools start to work on their second round applicants if we still have spaces in the grade in which you're interested. So to make sure you have the best shot possible at the spaces that are available, it's important to be in that first round of admission. And as I've now said, I think 10 or 12 times, to be able to be at the front of the line for financial assistance, it's important that you're in that first round and that you meet all the deadlines and submit all your paperwork. And on any of those fronts, if you ever have any questions, if there's any confusion, if you're worried of something uploaded, if you can't confirm that we have something, please just email us or call us. But that's the first round. And a colleague years ago said that, applying for financial assistance, it's like going to the wedding buffet. Like if you're at the front of the line, like all the good food is there and you can have anything you want. And if you're at the end of the line at the wedding buffet, it's going to be like Jell-O and dinner rolls for you. So it's important that you are in that first round and at the front of the line when we're offering out that $6.3 million in financial assistance. Excuse me.
A similar question, just wanted to confirm that if you are applying for a non-entry grade such as 7th, are you considered late enrolling? I think it's along the same lines as the previous.
No, same answer as before. So it doesn't have to do with the grade in which you're applying to, it has to do with the timeline in which you're applying. So if you're applying for an off year like 7th grade or 4th grade or something like that, that's perfectly fine. There's obviously limited spaces in those grades, so it's even more important that you get everything done in the first round. But the grade doesn't matter. The timing and completing of your process on time is what matters.
Do you have to apply every year?
Yes. So we are going to go through this process with you every year and do an analysis every year. Some people have very consistent and steady years, but some people have very different years, thinking about realtors who work on commissions. Maybe you win the lottery one year. We want to know if you won the lottery. So yes, you'll go through this every year. It's the same thing when you receive financial assistance in college. It's an annual process.
Speaking of college, if someone has a child applying to us and a child applying to college and they don't yet know the college tuition, how would they fill out the form?
The form will make an allowance towards college. So it actually doesn't really matter what the college tuition is. So as I said earlier on, it's going to come up with one number, right? This is, let's just say your family can afford $10,000 towards tuition. It will proportionately send or set aside some of that for your older child for college, and then set aside the rest of it for your child to come to St. Stephen's and St. Agnes. So regardless of where your child is going to college, the formula is already taking that number and breaking it apart, if you will.
Do you use tabs?
Nobody uses TADS. TADS got bought out. You see my sad face, and did you hear Jill's sad tone when she asked the question on your behalf, whoever that was? TADS got bought out by SSS in the last few months, and so we are migrating everyone over to SSS, quite honestly, by lack of choice. So everyone will move over to that. As a new family, hopefully that's pretty easy for you. It's been a little bit of a hiccup for our current families that have been used to doing TADS every single year and are very comfortable with it, and they had to learn a little bit. But yeah, TADS is no longer.
Boy, a lot of people asking what we use. So something we should mention is the link to the application for financial assistance will come in that email in early December. It
Yes.
is also on our website on the tuition page if you want to get a head start. There's a whole bunch of information on that page. Let's see. Another question is, we're applying for Early Saints. Do you offer financial assistance? If not, can we apply down the road, such as kindergarten?
You can. We do not offer financial assistance for Early Saints, which is our 3-year-old program, nor do we offer financial assistance for junior kindergarten, which is typically 4-year-olds. As I said earlier, if you come in and you're not receiving financial assistance, you have to wait 2 years. But if you come in at Early Saints, 2 years later would be kindergarten. So in that very specific scenario, you would be able to apply for financial assistance in kindergarten because it would be 2 years later. If you come in at junior kindergarten, then you would have to wait until 1st grade 2 years later to apply for financial assistance.
There are a couple of questions about divorce. One question is, what if the second parent is not involved at all but pays child support? Does that second parent need to apply? And what if that second parent won't? And then I'll ask the second one after that.
Yeah, that's something we'll work with you on an individual basis. It's a lot of it's going to be part of what the expectation of that second parent is. If they are not in the Northern Virginia area and they're not involved in the child's life, then no, we wouldn't necessarily expecting them to be part of the process. If they are going to be showing up at games and parent-teacher conferences and expect us to keep them as informed as we were keeping the parent who has custody, then yes, they would need to be part of the process. So that's something we'll work with you on a one-on-one basis to understand what your family situation is.
And then kind of the opposite of that, if there are dual households and they're both very involved, do we account for 2 living expense allowances, such as a mortgage for one and a mortgage for another, or is it just one application?
No, we would account for both. And that would also be the same case in the first question with divorced parents. So if parents are living in 2 different households and have 2 different mortgages and utilities and all of that, we would absolutely account for 2 different households.
Could you remind everyone of the website where to go to make sure that they've marked interest in financial assistance?
So that's going to actually be in your application for admission. So it's not something that you do on the website. When you apply for admission, one of the very last questions in that process is asking if you're interested in financial assistance. If you have already applied for admission and you are not sure, if you check that box, you can send us an email. I had those emails up before, or stick a quick note in the Q&A, and Jill can check that tomorrow and get back to you and let you know that either you did or you didn't, and if you didn't, we will fix it. And if you haven't yet applied for admission, when you do, when you get to the very end of that form, check off that box, and then we'll be in touch with you about December 1st.
Do you set up your payment plans upon enrollment in March or over the summer?
If you're in that first round that we've been talking about, that I assume all of you will be in because you're part of this webinar already in November, so you guys are all on the ball here and within the normal timeline, then you will set it up in March. Depending on the payment plan that you pick, your first payment may not be due for a few months, right? If you're only doing like the 4-month payment plan, Jill, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the first payment isn't due until July, but if you're doing the 12-month or the 10-month payment plan, that's going to kick in right away because the last payment needs to be done by the end of the upcoming school year. So it depends on the payment plan you pick But you will set that up when you sign your enrollment contract. You will set up your payment plan. You will indicate an interest in transportation. You'll indicate an interest in lunch. And then in June, you'll actually sign up for transportation and sign up for lunch. But getting your early indication in May just helps us plan for that.
Is there a minimum percentage of tuition that a family would be required to pay?
No, no. If a family needs our full assistance and can demonstrate that by going through the process, then they will get our full assistance.
I think that is. Oh, hang on, a couple more have come in and rhymes and saying that.
Okay, I'll take a quick water while you do that.
Okay, so do you offer multiple children financial consideration? And the second part of that is, or any sports consideration.
Or any sport consideration, was that the second part?
Yeah, I think that would be merit, right?
Okay, yeah, so no sport consideration or other talents, violin playing, community service, excellence, whatever. None of those things are considered. It's purely a financial process. And then yes, multiple children. So as I said earlier, we'll take that number and then we will divide it among the children. So it may be, let's kind of stick with that 10,000. That was an easy number we were using before. You may pay $10,000 to us to support one child you have with us, or you're paying $10,000 to us to support two children, and internally we're splitting that up, 5,000 for this child and 5,000 for that child. But just because you have two children doesn't mean you have two pots of $10,000. So you're still paying the $10,000. It's just kind of how it gets allocated. Now, fast forward, and I know we got some early Saints families on here, right? So we're fast forwarding 14 years away from now. But when that older child graduates, then suddenly it's not going to be 5 and 5. Suddenly it's going to be 10 for the child that's still with us. So the number of tuitions you're paying has a really big impact on this whole process.
Looks like the last kind of general question is, what percentage of families receive some sort of financial assistance?
That is about 29% of our families, I believe, is this year's number. So about a third of our families receiving some level of financial assistance. Some are receiving just a little bit. They just need a little, kind of get over the hump amount of money. And some people are receiving significant financial assistance. And both of those are okay. I mean, in the game of financial assistance, in the end, you're trusting us with your child. Like, we gave you money, but you gave us your child. Like, we win. So we're okay wherever people fall on the financial assistance spectrum that they qualify for. Because if you want to have your child become a saint, and we think they would be great here, we don't want money to get in the way. So we'll support you at the level that makes sense, because we're just honored and thrilled to have your child with us, and to have your trust to have your child with us, and to have your family be part of the Saints family. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us this evening. I hope this is the start of a conversation that we'll continue to have with you, and a partnership and a relationship, and hopefully it will last for years to come. But it was great to have you here. Be in touch with your questions. Keep an eye on the website. There's a number of upcoming events that are still coming up in the next couple of weeks here. And from all of us here at St. Stephen St. Agnes to all of you, very best wishes for a wonderful Thanksgiving. Take care. Have a great night, everybody.